Hello and welcome to the Bald Ambition Podcast. I'm your very bald host, Mookie Spitz. And the one with all the ambition today is Mr. Jim Oberweis. He is a former Illinois senator, and he's got some stories to tell and opinions to share. And I can't wait to dive in with you, Jim. Welcome aboard.
Thanks, Mookie. I appreciate the chance to talk to your audience.
I am a Chicago native, born and raised. So I'm familiar with some Chicago, Illinois politics. Our governors end up in jail. That seems to be a common theme. How many of them went to jail? Most folks don't realize there's 4 of them, right?
Two Republicans and 2 Democrats.
So we're bipartisan in our level of corruption.
And by the way, the most recent Speaker of the House, who served for 40 years and was Speaker for 36 of those 40 years, is also on his way to prison.
It's a distinction. We own it, I think, in Illinois for some reason. Now I live in California. I lived in New York for over a decade. But you know, my heart is in Illinois, and it's wonderful to have you on. I'm eager to hear about some of your stories.
Did you ever have Oberweis ice cream when you lived in Chicago?
You know, actually, yes. Is it? That's funny. I didn't put the two together, but now that you bring it up, is there any connection with that?
Yeah, that was my family, and I was chairman of the company, non-executive chairman. I didn't work in the business, but I served on the board for 20 years or so.
Okay, terrific. And I did a little research into your background too. So you've been funding your political career privately to a certain extent too, which gives you some freedom and some leverage, I think.
Well, it allows me to vote where my heart is instead of having to pay attention to big contributors.
Absolutely, and big contributors, Citizens United. It's been kind of crazy. Another story that I've heard, which would be wonderful maybe to anchor our conversation in, is Barack Obama and those primaries going back a few years. But that's one of the branches of history that I think a lot of people would be fascinated to hear about. Can you give us a little context for how that shook out?
I was encouraged. Let's see. I'm trying to think. That must have been about 2004, approximately. I was encouraged to run for the U.S. Senate. Barack Obama was on the Democrat side, so there were a few debates where I had both Republicans and Democrats. I got to meet him a little bit in that fashion. Anyway, I came in second to a very strong candidate, Jack Ryan, who you may know, and his wife, Jerry Ryan, was an actress. And he was, a former Goldman Sachs guy. He'd left his job to teach school on the south side of Chicago. I mean, he was a really good candidate. But after a few months, and I think it was June, he announced that he was going to withdraw because the Chicago Tribune had pried open his sealed divorce agreement, in which there were some accusations from his ex-wife that were he just didn't want circulated and didn't want his son to have to deal with. So, of course, the logical thing then would be to replace the first place guy with a second place guy, who was me. However, I had taken a very vocal stand against illegal immigration, and I was probably too early at the time for many people. I certainly was too early for the liberal press in Chicago. I mean, they went crazy. I actually had a commercial where I was flying in a helicopter over Soldier Field saying enough people are entering this company illegally every week to fill every seat in Soldier Field. Well, they went crazy. First, they thought, no, he's got to be lying. But then I produced a study from a professor at the University of Michigan justifying those numbers. Then it was, well, he must be biased. He must be racist or whatever. So as it turned out, the head of the Republican State Central Committee did not want me on that ballot. She bought this whole business about not wanting illegal immigration to be a major issue associated with the Republicans at that time. So they asked the third place person, a fine gentleman, another state senator by the name of Steve Rauschenberger, if he would be willing to take the place. And my understanding is he told them, no, you should take the second place guy. Well, that didn't go over well with them, so they kept looking. Eventually, they talked to the former Bears coach, considered being the nominee, and he had a lot of name recognition, obviously. He thought about it for a couple of weeks and came back and said no, he wasn't interested. You should take the second place guy. Then, in desperation, they finally came up with a brilliant solution. That is to bring in Alan Keyes from Maryland to move to Chicago. And then, that would take race out. Then we have an African American against an African American. So that was their solution. Unfortunately, about 3 weeks into the campaign, they got him talking about reparations, and it was all over. It was downhill from there. It was a disaster, and that kind of made Obama's career. Now he wins by a big percentage. He's now a national figure, and that certainly was a major stepping stone to him becoming president. Some of my friends jokingly, thank God, accused me of helping elect Obama by not getting in there and running as the replacement. Wasn't my fault.
Well, it's an interesting story, and it's also evocative in the sense of how much our country oscillates from one extreme to another. So I sometimes like to think that Barack Obama would have been impossible without George Bush Jr., and it's hard to conceive of Donald Trump without Barack Obama. So you might have nudged the arrow one way and then created a reaction that produced a counter reaction that engendered Donald Trump. So it's very, very interesting.
Some truth to that.
Yeah, and your position on immigration was a harbinger, obviously, of immigration mandate reform that we're experiencing right now.
I find out throughout my life, I have frequently been a little ahead of my times. That's one example. I started a mutual fund family in the 80s, and I was very strong on small cap stock. Again, I was a little ahead of my time there, but they had a very good period in the 10 or 15 years after that. On a number of issues, I've been very concerned recently about the unsustainable growth in our national debt. And some people are telling me again, I'm a little ahead of my time, but some point is going to come back in our industry. We've talked about what's sometimes referred to as a black swan event, which is an unexpected, out of the blue happening that triggers an unexpected reaction. And that's exactly what I'm afraid of with our national debt. Something happens suddenly, triggers something, and now we have much higher interest rates, much higher inflation rates. And to be honest with you, I was not looking to run for this congressional seat. I had no interest. Well, let me give you a little history leading up to that. In 2012, I was elected to the Illinois State Senate. In 2016, I was reelected. And in 2018, I became the Republican whip. In 2020, they asked me to run against the incumbent Democrat Congresswoman, which I agreed to do. And I had the president's endorsement in 2020. And as it turned out, as of election night, I had won by 1,500 votes. However, this is Illinois, and 3 days later, they decided to count a bunch of mail-in ballots that were never initialed by an election judge as required under Illinois law. After that, I said, okay, that's it. I am done forever with Illinois, and I'm done forever with politics. I'm going to Florida to play pickleball and golf, and I ended up playing some duplicate bridge. And interestingly, I went from beginner to life master in 3 years because I really enjoyed the game and picked it up very quickly. So anyway, that's kind of the background where I was coming from. And I honestly had no intention of running for this congressional seat, but literally within the first week after Byron Donalds, our congressman, who's a great congressman, announced that he was going to run for governor of Florida, I had 8 or 9 people saying, Jim, please consider running for this open seat. We have concerns about our national debt. And they hit me, hit me in my soft spot, if you will, because that's a huge concern that I have as well. I heard it enough times that I said, okay, I'm in.
Well, to give viewers and listeners some context, the national debt is what, around $34 trillion. That is
up. It
it's
was
more than that
36,
now.
it was 36 trillion last year when they asked me to run. It's 37 trillion now.
Wow.
It's on its way to
All right.
38.
So when people just toss numbers around, it's hard to conceive of, but that's $37,000 billion. And the interest on that is more than what we're paying the Department of Defense
Correct.
to maintain. So it's close to $1 trillion. Is that right? Just the interest on $37 trillion.
Yes, and that's with our very low current interest rates. Now, if this so-called black swan event happens and those interest rates go up to 6 or 7 or 8%, look out! This can start a whole cycle that would be very, very dangerous for our country. So we have to stop that. We have to get control of that. And I think a lot of politicians will talk about that. And by the way, I don't consider myself a politician. I'm a business guy. Inside and out, an entrepreneur. I've started numerous businesses, and I'm doing this as a service. And by the way, I've pledged that as long as I serve in Congress, I will donate my entire salary, the equivalent thereof, to charity. So I'm not doing it for money either. And by the way, that's the other thing. We can talk about it more, but I also consider myself a philanthropist. I started the Oberweis Foundation 30 years ago, and we support conservative causes who are out to provide education on conservative ways. Things like Turning Point USA. That was one of the first that we supported. I knew Charlie Kirk when he was a high school senior. Just an amazing young man, and never a violent bone in his body. He was a terrific guy. What an unbelievable loss. Anyway, I support those types of causes, and I also support people in need. Things like food banks, cancer research, caring centers, pregnancy centers, those types of organizations as well.
Well, that's a great overview. Let's go back to the debt just for a second, because your opinions and your actions on these issues, especially when they're harbingers of policy to come, administrations to come, is interesting and it's timely. So Elon Musk joined the Trump administration, as we know, and then the establishment of Doge. And the breaking point for Musk vis-a-vis Trump, at least from what we saw from the newspapers, was the debt. So he's slashing departments. He's jumping around stages with a chainsaw, figuratively and literally. And the big, beautiful bill was passed, which just piled on more debt. So regardless of which side of the political aisle you sit on, from a matter of fiscal conservatism, right, from fiscal responsibility, the big, beautiful bill just layered on more debt. So do you find that frustrating in the same way that Elon Musk found it frustrating?
Very. And politicians talk about wanting to reduce spending, reduce the debt, so on, but nobody seems to be able to do. Or it's all the common line is we'll get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse, right? Everybody uses those terms, but nobody seems to do anything about it. And I was hopeful, and we've heard this for 20 or 30 years. I was really hopeful with Elon Musk in there that we'd actually make some progress in that direction. I'm disappointed that things didn't work out better than they did, but I think he probably threw some good ideas out there, and hopefully there are people following up on some of those ideas. I have a few ideas of my own, by the way. For example, Um, Congress's job, one of their main jobs, is to pass a budget. Guess what? They haven't done that in more than a decade. I believe that we should have a policy that if Congress does not pass a budget when it's due, they shouldn't get paid until they do pass a budget. And no retroactive pay either. And I promise you, if that is the law of the land, Congress will pass a budget because they all want to get paid. So it would mean that Republicans would have to work with Democrats. There'd have to be some compromises, but they would make those compromises. They would get it done. And I think that would be the right thing to do for our country. Furthermore, that budget should be balanced in every year, except perhaps in times of war, possibly in times of recession. And if it's not going to be a balanced budget, we should have to have Congress pass it by an extra majority, perhaps a 60% vote or something of that nature. If we did those things, let me tell you, it would begin to take care of that debt in a hurry. I believe it would start to reduce it, but even if it didn't reduce it, if it just stopped growing, as long as our economy can continue to grow, it would become less and less of a significant problem over a period of time. Right now, our debt is approximately equal to our entire gross domestic product. And in some other cases for other countries, that's been a tipping point where people have begun to lose confidence in the currency. And by the way, if some of our viewers aren't aware, our treasury debt has always been AAA for forever.
Not anymore.
Exactly. It's one notch below that. And there's, of course, some concern if we don't do something, it could go down another notch. This is really not a good thing for our country. So the right thing is to get in there, to start to get control of that spending and get control of our debt. Another concrete principle that I've talked about that I think makes a lot of sense. Again, this would take a little compromise from Republicans and Democrats, but we're spending a lot of money on ICE. Now, as we talked about, I'm very, very much in favor of controlling our immigration problem, securing our borders, encouraging people who are here illegally to leave. Well, paying ICE agents and having 500 of them go into Minneapolis is not the right way to do that. Paying people $3,000 a piece to leave our country is not the right way to do that. The right way to do that is to stop government benefits to people here illegally. Stop paying SNAP benefits. Stop paying unemployment compensation. Stop paying Social Security, for heaven's sakes. If people are here illegally and they pay into the Social Security system and they can't receive anything, maybe that'll help our Social Security system a little bit. Those are the right way to deal with this. And guess what? Over a period of time, it would make this country less attractive for people to sneak in here illegally to take advantage of those government benefits because they wouldn't be there. So it solves all kinds of problems. It solves some fiscal problems and it solves some of our immigration problems. Why can't Congress see this? It's just common sense.
That's part of the problem. In order for Congress to enact reform, Congress needs to be reformed. So when it comes to congressional pay, they need to undercut their ability to be freeloaders, in a sense. When it comes to congressional accountability, especially in this administration, Congress has abdicated its role to a large extent to the executive. Now, if you agree with Trump on certain issues, certain policies, and you want them expedited, sure, it cuts to the chase faster. You eliminate some of the congressional legislative bureaucracy. But aside from a handful of Republican senators who seem to be autonomous, Rand Paul, for example, there's very little pushback and there's very little legislation. So you come across in certain key ways as an old school Republican. And by that, I mean, you believe in the separation of powers. You believe in a powerful Congress who could legislate. And you believe in affecting change, which is not performative, but it's actual in terms of practice. So sounds like you oppose these blanket ICE raids and you're more for presumably targeted approaches and approaches that have to do with the money, which is, by the way, I agree, it's not talked about enough. Remove incentives.
Along with what I was saying about ICE, we need to have an agreement with all states and municipalities. If they have in detention somebody who has committed other crimes besides just immigration crimes, they must turn those people over to ICE. That's the way we're going to get rid of that. That's what the whole idea was: get rid of the criminals, stop these murderers, these rapists, and so on, get them out of this country. So absolutely, that has to be an agreement. And if they don't do it, cut off the federal dollars to them. Again, money in a case like that will get action. It's the right thing to do. And by the way, if I can put a plug in, if our viewers like the common sense ideas that I'm talking about, I would ask them to please go to our website, which is votejimo.com. Vote.
I'll put it in the podcast description so they can click on it. Yeah.
Great. I appreciate it. I think they'll see more common sense ideas. I'm in a fortunate position where I'm not doing this for a new job. I'm a very strong proponent of term limits. I think if we have term limits, we'll get better congressmen, better senators. We'll get people who are patriots, who are doing it to help our country, not for a career, not for the money. The whole idea of career politicians, like I saw in Illinois, is just disastrous for the state of Illinois. It's disastrous for many states that have that situation. Florida is a wonderful example of a state that enacted 8-year term limits for legislators and for the governor. Now, you can say, well, Governor DeSantis has done a great job. I hate to see him go after 8 years, but guess what? We got another good one coming. Byron Donalds is going to be equally great governor, so it's still the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's refreshing to hear your common sense, budget-based approach to a lot of these policies and issues. And you must be frustrated in certain ways. When Donald Trump first came to power, yeah, he endorsed you. And obviously you don't want to convey any disloyalty or, fight against the mainstream. But there must be some frustration on your part with regard to, as you mentioned, the ICE actions, now with the raging war in the Middle East. It's complicated running the country. But how do you feel about these kind of contradictions?
Let me make it very clear. I think that our president has done some incredibly good things for our country. Securing the border is certainly one of those. Getting rid of this whole woke culture. I mean, we've turned the country into the right direction. I'm very supportive of that. You mentioned that the big beautiful bill certainly didn't help balance our budget, and you're correct in that. Yet, if I were there, I believe I would have probably had to end up voting for it, because it would have been a huge tax increase if we didn't do that. So it wasn't perfect, in my opinion. And I would have hoped that we could deal with some of those measures individually after the passage of that bill. Now, unfortunately, not too much has really been dealt with yet, but I've just suggested to you a couple of solid principles that would help to get our budget back into balance. And I think there's lots of opportunities for that. And, we talk about rooting out waste and fraud. There's plenty of money there. I mean, look at what we found in Minneapolis, for heaven's sakes. I mean, that's just crazy. And it's not just Minneapolis. Your state, California, by the way, I think is pretty guilty of a lot of that stuff too. So there's a lot of room to make progress there.
Absolutely. No disagreement here. I think Americans have become so tribal and polarized that it's very, very frustrating to get clear and actionable about issues and make sense in that kind of way. Why and how do you think we got here? You've been active for decades, right? So you are part of the old guard when it comes to the GOP, and you've seen the American political landscape change. Some would call it evolution, some would call it the opposite. But why do you think there's so much infighting? Why can't we agree on key issues and make pragmatic policy that could benefit everybody?
We have started a great business, the Oberweis family of mutual funds. And by the way, Morningstar, which ranks funds, just ranked our microcap fund as one of the top 5 funds in the entire country for the last 25 years. And that's helped us grow from 0 startup to today managing over $5 billion. I'm very fortunate that I have a son very capable of running the business. He's been running it since I got involved in this political process. It was not my goal. I felt a calling to try to help our country in that regard. As I said, it's certainly not a career. Not doing it for the money. I'll donate an amount equal to my salary. And I did the same thing in the Illinois Senate. I donated an amount equal to my salary back to the Oberweis Foundation, which I started 30 years ago, which supports conservative causes and people in need of financial help. So I think I'm doing it for the right reason. I think we need more people following in that direction, and term limits would help get us there. There are lots of common sense things that we could do, and I realize I'll only be 1 out of 400 and some. And by the way, I want to mention this. I thought my idea of no budget, no pay was kind of a new creative idea. No sooner did I had an article on it written in the local press, I got a call from Rick Scott, our senator, and said, guess what, Jim? I've already filed that bill. So he's got that going in the U.S. Senate, and I hope that if I can get into Congress, I can help to push that in the Congress. And by the way, if we pass something like that, it would end all these continuing resolutions. It would end government shutdowns. There wouldn't be any more. So it's a win-win for our country.
Absolutely. So again, you're very much a pragmatist, and you look at it from a fiscal point of view, fiscal responsibility, fiscal action, money walks. But American culture seems to consider that secondary or tertiary. It's all about values now and deep emotion. And we're divided like never before. Why? What has happened to us where we've gone from being able to talk to each other about all these issues, the debt, immigration, the border, the presidency, and now it doesn't seem like we're capable of doing it anymore. What happened?
Well, it seems like under Barack Obama, some conflict started to emerge, and it's gotten considerably worse since then. I mean, honestly, I have a couple of daughters who live in California, by the way, who we just can't talk about the president. We can't talk about politics. What do they call it? Trump syndrome, where they just can't discuss it.
Trump derangement syndrome, TDS.
Right. Exactly. And as a result, we really try to talk about things other than politics to the best degree that we can. But every once in a while, something sneaks in, and it's a problem. So I hope we can get past this. 200 years ago, things were this bad or worse. If you remember in the history books, some of the politicians, if they got into a real big argument, they would go outside and have a duel and kill one another. So it's not that bad yet, but it's pretty bad.
I think part of it might be etiquette. Frankly, I find a lot of Trump's policies common sense. So, for example, a secure border.
Right.
You have a country, you need a secure border, right? Power throughout the world, staking the claim. The list goes on where by any reasonable standard, I would say Trump's policies and worldview make sense for America. But there's a style to him which comes across to many people as a little bit rough around the edges. The etiquette of the presidency has been, in a sense, turned upside down. You've gone from the banquet dinners to the McDonald's. You've introduced a new type of polemic, if you will, and I just feel I'm no spring chicken. I've seen a lot of evolution. I was in high school during the Reagan years, and I've seen this kind of pendulum go back and forth. Donald Trump seems like the unpolitician, like 7 Up was the uncola. He's the consummate outsider. He came in. I've lived in New York, so I know that Queens mentality too. And I think he was just so abrasive and continues to ruffle so many feathers deliberately that
Yeah,
a lot of people emotionally just can't handle it. It short circuits
I
people's
think there's some truth to
sensibility.
that. But on the other hand, if we look at the whole woke culture where they were, pressing all kinds of silly nonsense, if you believe that the government shouldn't pay for operations on our kids to change their sex, you were a bad person. If you believe that everybody should be treated equally and not special privileges, you are a bad person. You don't understand. You're not fair. So that's where it started, and it certainly got worse. And now we're reversing a lot of that in a hurry.
You got an action and then a reaction
Right.
to it. Personally, I think one of the most ridiculous and most ubiquitous things is the she, he, him, her signature line. Now, it would come across as least violative, and you would say, well, who cares? But I think to your point, it really epitomizes the overextension of what could be considered woke culture. And it really precipitated this backfire, which is really gone against the self-interests of folks who really just mandated their own worldview in a way that comes across as undemocratic. There's a sense of hypocrisy and irony to all that,
Mookie,
which
you're right on. Absolutely.
yeah, which Trump's often acerbic manner appealed to a lot of people. As much as he triggered folks, he got
He
folks.
said things that people were thinking but were afraid to say.
And again, the libertarian me loves this kind of provocateur, which questions the most fundamental aspects of government, of policy, and even of decor. So I think, well, even if you consider it an experiment, I think the country's better off for it for being able to experience this kind of counterpoint and this kind of shakeup, which goes back to Musk and Doge and
Right.
reevaluating core principles. Because again, to Reagan's point, I'm from the government and I'm here to help is the last thing that'll really benefit anybody.
Speaking of Reagan, he was definitely one of my heroes. And I'll tell you one of the things that he said, some of the effect of, show me somebody who agrees with me on 80% of the issues. He's my 80% friend, not my 20% enemy. And I believe that 100%.
But that highlights one of the gaps, I think, in even the current administration, which is it's so provocative and it's so incendiary in ways that it doesn't necessarily encourage bipartisan action. It feeds off the polarizing fire of what came before it. And I
Right.
would just hope that we can get to the point where we are talking about policy and there is a sensibility on the part of the executive that he or she is representative of the entire country and not just his or her own constituency. If I have one major complaint about Trump, and again, I'm sitting here agreeing about the border and about a lot of the policy that's there, is this feeling of built-in animosity and division. And I don't think it's healthy for the country.
You brought up another issue, and that's the whole gerrymandering thing. I am
Yeah.
100% opposed to that. Iowa does it right, where they have a computer program that does everything to try to keep communities concise and together. And I came from Illinois, which is probably the one of the worst for gerrymandering. California is probably doing something. Florida actually has a provision in their constitution to make it more difficult to do that, but now Our president would like to see Florida redistrict right now. I hope that doesn't happen, quite frankly. That's one area that I disagree with. I understand the politics. He wants to get Texas and Florida, which are strong Republican states, to pick up a few seats for Congress. But that's something where short-term benefit would there'd be a short-term benefit, but in the long term, I don't think it's good for our country.
Yeah, I think the gerrymandering is a big problem, and it's become quid pro quo with Texas
Exactly.
laying down, and then
Exactly.
Newsom in California getting the proposition passed. And
Right.
that's not good for anybody.
Right.
It really fundamentally destroys one of the precepts of a democracy, which is
Correct.
we've got fair, balanced representation. And if you get rid of that, then what? Big issue. Looking forward, though, to the midterms are one thing, 2028, the evolution of American politics. You've been in the game for quite some time. Where do you think we're headed, and where do you want it to go? Like passing the baton to your kids, the next generation. Uh, what could or should America look like as we move
Well,
forward?
first of all, I'm financially secure. I'm not worried about it for myself, but I have 21 grandkids, and I am concerned as to whether or not they will have the same kinds of economic opportunities that I've had, the same type of opportunity to start a business, grow a business, and I want to do whatever I can to make sure that they do inherit that kind of a country. And I think getting our national debt under control is a huge step in that direction. So that's why I'm involved in this race. That's one of the big things that I care about. And the buzzword today is affordability and inflation and so on. Well, guess what? That's the best thing that we could do to keep inflation under control, to keep the value of our currency strong, and allow us to have those types of opportunities for future generations. So that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm here. Well,
Balancing the budget is the least sexy thing the
yeah,
government wants to
exactly.
do because they want to spend, right? And you want to
Yep.
placate your constituents so they get more enthusiastic about voting for you. All the special interests, the tax code is a mess.
And
So
as you
balancing the
pointed out
budget
earlier,
is,
most people don't understand what $1 trillion is, much less $37 trillion. And it's not an issue that's right there on their forefront. They're worried about, what is the price of gasoline? What is the price of eggs and butter and milk? From that standpoint, our campaign teams that keeps telling me, Jim, talk about affordability, not about the national debt. And I'm telling them, I'm doing this because I'm concerned about the national debt. I'm concerned about the future of our country, and this is the way we can solve it. I want to talk about the true things, the right things, not the politically slogan of the moment.
going back to Rand Paul from Kentucky, he's one of the few who keeps harping on the debt, harping on civil liberties, harping on controlling the government in ways and keeping it accountable that most folks in Congress, at least on the GOP side, have abdicated. Conversely, if you look at Trump's global strategy, Venezuela, the Middle East now, I think it's about the oil. It's about global power. And the reason I bring it up within the context of the debt, if you can't really bring down that debt, although it's a problem, one way is to fill the coffers a little bit with other sources of revenue and at least influence and power. How do you feel about this Monroe Doctrine being reanimated in a sense? People are calling it the Don Roe Doctrine, where reinstating American hegemony and control in the Western Hemisphere and going even beyond that to ultimately, I think, secure 1/5 of the world's oil supply. Because between the Middle East and Venezuela, you're talking about half the oil on the planet.
Well, what the president has done, obviously in Venezuela, was a masterful stroke. It showed some incredible planning and strategy and effectiveness of the American military. Uh, when you turn to Iran, it's a little different situation. He has taken, in my opinion, a huge gamble. If he is able to get regime change and get people who care about free markets and free elections in charge in Iran, he will go down in history as one of the strongest, best, most wonderful presidents ever, by bringing peace to the Middle East and bringing true change to the whole culture there. But it isn't clear that that's going to be the result at this point.
That's a big if. It's a big if, especially without boots on the ground. And even if you bring boots on the ground, it's a big country, and they have an entrenched infrastructure there.
And I'm not sure that you can bomb your way to a regime change.
You most likely cannot. So what is an outcome that could be beneficial to the U.S.? It's beneficial to Israel. Every bomb that falls on Iran is beneficial to Israel, but how could it be beneficial to us medium to long term?
Well, I would have to say Israel has been our friend. Israel is the only true democracy in the entire Middle East. I think it is. I think we need to continue to support them. I support their efforts, and to the degree that we can make a difference in Iran, and it helps Israel, and it lessens the power of Hezbollah or Hamas. Great, but it's what is the long-term strategy? What happens in Iran? And maybe it does take boots on the ground. Hopefully, maybe those boots are Israeli boots, but that would be very difficult for many Iranians to accept. Even more difficult, perhaps, than U.S. boots on the ground. And I don't really want to see U.S. boots on the ground either. So it's a difficult strategy. The best thing we can hope for is that we get rid of the new Ayatollah, the son of the old one, and get a more accommodative leader eventually to rise up in that country. I mean, the other alternative is that we find ways to start arming the millions of people who are opposed to the current regime and the current policies of the country, and that they're able to stage I don't know if you want to call it a coup, a takeover, a change, whatever you want to call it. That is a possibility, but again, a difficult strategy to enact.
Yeah, the Kurdish people are 10 million strong in Iran, and they have a strong presence in Iraq. We have bases in Erbil, in Iraq to this day. They've been our loyal ally against Saddam Hussein, ISIS, and we just have a terrible track record of being opportunistic to the point that we engage with them as partners, and when it's equally convenient, we'll discard them. So I think they're probably highly skeptical of engaging in an insurrection against the Tehran government, knowing that we've been fickle in the past, and repercussions of it not succeeding are existential.
Right.
So an insurrection like that would be nice, but this kind of proxy army is pushing it a little bit. So we'll have to wait and see. I personally think Trump, with the success of Venezuela, was hoping for not so much regime change, which is a long shot, but a similar kind of situation. Delcy in Venezuela now does Trump's bidding about key issues. No oil to Cuba, for example, and bringing back the American oil companies to build up the infrastructure. And Delcy knows that with a snap of his fingers, the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier will be back off the shore of Caracas. So that kind of force strength and getting Venezuela to behave or at least do Trump's bidding, I think Trump is hoping for something similar in Iran.
I'm sure
that we pummel them to the point where they have to listen to us. So no more nukes, dismantle your missiles. We'll let you stay in power, or at least we'll stop bombing you, and we'll tell the Israelis to stop bombing you if you behave. And I think that is probably a best case scenario out of all of this.
Well, second best. The best would be total overthrow and new government.
Again, that's just so unlikely, fingers crossed. But second best is still better than civil war on the one hand, and here's the new boss, same as the old boss on the other.
Right.
So we'll have to wait and see. How much have you thought about international politics? You've obviously been representing the people of Illinois. You have your own business, which is very much in a domestic focus. I'm sure you've got interests elsewhere too. But what's your vision for America's role in the world moving forward? We've got Russia distracted with Ukraine, but China is always that sleeping giant that's woken up. And then you've got Taiwan. How do you feel about America's place in the world moving forward?
I think we have taken a big step forward. I think the entire world has seen what we have been able to do in Venezuela and Iran. I guess we're not walking softly and carrying a big stick. We're walking loudly and carrying a big stick at the same time.
We're using the stick.
Yes, right, exactly. Look, my expertise is clearly in economic matters. Foreign policy, I certainly have a lot to learn, and I recognize that I don't have access to the same information that our president does or that our Department of War have. So I have to kind of cross my fingers and hope that they have the information, they know what they're doing, and that the end result will be favorable. But I will tell you one area that I do have a little disagreement with. From my viewpoint, in the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia is the bad guy, period, end of discussion. They invaded the Ukraine. We should be standing firm to support the Ukraine. I do think the president has done the right thing to get the rest of Europe involved, because Europe's even more important for the rest of Europe than it is for the United States. But we need to continue to support them. And I believe the right thing to do is to give Ukraine long-range missiles. If they have the ability to attack Moscow, suddenly Putin's going to be a lot more interested in negotiating a deal.
I can tell you're a Ronald Reagan fan.
You bet.
I think that's what Ronald Reagan would recommend. He's spinning right down there with regard to this issue. He's like, what are you guys doing? This is clear cut.
Yeah.
What about the tariffs? Not to pick on the Donald too much, but as a businessman, how do you feel about the tariffs? Now, the Supreme Court has ruled that the IEEPA emergency designation is unconstitutional. The administration is going about circumventing that with individual cases against individual countries. But how did you feel about the tariffs? And how do you feel about such a controlling, restrictive, heavy hand on the part of the executive?
Well, let me tell you another part of my background. I'm a University of Chicago MBA, and they're certainly free traders, and I tend to support that. I believe that if we had free and fair trade worldwide, it would be the best thing for the entire world. Everybody would benefit. However, we don't. And again, growing up in the dairy industry, I'm aware that, let's say, a farmer in northern Minnesota or northern Wisconsin can't ship his milk 10 miles away or 20 miles away into Canada because of provisions, the huge tariffs that they had on U.S. milk and dairy products. So to the degree that the president has been able to use tariffs to get concessions from other countries to either reduce their tariffs or to open their trade to make it more fair, more power to him. Again, he's taken some gambles there, but in many cases they've been successful and they've worked out. So I applaud him for having done that. With the Supreme Court ruling, though, we have certainly kind of a mess. and we're going back now and redoing them under different legal requirements. I hope he's successful. Again, my ideal situation would be no tariffs for anybody and no trade restrictions for anybody. I mean, what the heck? We can produce soybeans and corn more efficiently than China can. China can build bicycles and toys and other things more efficiently than we can. Let China build the toys. Let us grow the soybeans and corn and trade. I mean, that's the way the world would benefit.
Yeah, and I understand this need for emergency resources. So if we do go to war in a big way, we need to be able to, cook up aluminum. We need microprocessors. We need to be independent when it comes
Sure.
to core infrastructure, supply
Sure.
chain needs. I get it. I think that is important from a manufacturing point of view, indigenous. But I love your point that why are we tariffing the hell out of Calcutta so that we can have T-shirt factories in Louisiana? That's not what we do. So I think a little more common sense and a little more maybe self-control might go a long way. But you can't have everything. Nobody's perfect, and America is figuring it out. I think in ways that is provocative, but also very, very healthy, because I think we need this kind of disruption. We need to shake stuff up. And out of that disruption, I think we get insights, we get new experience, and we get new opportunities. Speaking of which, I have to ask you about the number one cliche, which is also true, which is artificial intelligence. How you made a face? A lot of people are making a face. Do you consider it an existential threat, especially economically? And as a businessman, you see the CapEx of companies, which are ridiculous. The EBITDA, right? The market cap ratio of these companies are through the roof, and debt is at record levels. Do you see it as a bubble? Are you afraid? You're afraid of the debt, which you should be, which we all should be. But is the AI bubble overhyped, or does it keep you up at night?
Look, if we go back, 1,000 years or 2,000 years, everybody was a farmer or a hunter primarily. And eventually we got a little specialization. And along came the wheel and other, the automobile in the 1900s. And everybody was worried about the horses and so on, and the buggy whip manufacturers. Then, we got radio and TV and everything changed. And then you got the internet, and everybody was worried about, oh, we're going to lose so many jobs and they're going to be put out of business. And so, look, these technological changes have historically resulted in some change. There's no question about it. Some industries lose jobs, other industries benefit, but on balance, the efficiency, the effectiveness of our economy continues to grow and grow very rapidly. AI is, I think, just a continuation of the same trend. There will be many people who will lose their jobs if they're in certain industries, but there will be all kinds of new jobs opening up. And if there aren't, look, in a worst case basis, we could adjust by having people work 30-hour weeks instead of 40-hour weeks. So still, again, we benefit by these types of innovations. Now, is there some risk to somehow artificial intelligence taking over and doing things that are detrimental to humanity? I'm not enough of an expert in that area to have an opinion. My guess is no. I'm not terribly worried about it. I don't lose any sleep at night. But it certainly is something we should pay attention to and be aware of. Am I worried about companies being too levered in trying to grow their AI experience? Look, the stock market will determine that. One thing I know is I can have my opinion, but it's the market gets it right over a long period of time. It sometimes gets it wrong in a short period of time, but eventually it gets it right. So we'll see what the ultimate decision is. There will be, no doubt, some companies that will be huge winners. Um, we happen to own a stock that's in that area. The symbol is AAOI, Applied Optoelectronics, and that stock has gone from about 35 just 30 or 40 days ago to it hit a high of, I don't know, 125 or so, like a day or two ago. It's down about 17 points today. So it's reacting to investors' beliefs very, very quickly. So the market will help to determine the winners and the losers. There'll be some of each.
I'm Pollyanna about most of this. And I think, to your point, there's going to be a lot of disruption. But to the point I made earlier, if we shake it up, I think we'll come out better for it. But it's going to be tough. And there's going to be major winners and even bigger losers. So you got to put your chips in the right place, which is hard to do. But be optimistic. I think I'm hopeful for America. I'm hopeful for what we can do. And it's good to look forward to stuff and just the spirit of the country. I'm a first generation American. Both my parents were Hungarian, left after the war. They emigrated actually to Caracas, Venezuela, of all places. I have a son who's a Marine at Camp Pendleton. So I was wondering if he might get deployed to Venezuela, and then it would have been a full circle, right? So I love this country. I think the experiment continues. And I think it's important that people keep that in mind, that there's no certain solutions. There's no one answer to things. And as long as we just treat each other with civility, we listen as much as we speak, and we embrace opinions. We don't just throw them off. And then we believe in values, work, focus on your family, be patriotic to the country. If you just get a few of these things right, we'll all be better off for it. And I think we'll solve 90% of our problems with just that.
Mookie, you're right on. Exactly.
So thanks so much for joining us, Jim Oberweis. When you mentioned your name and the ice cream, I knew about your businesses, but I remember the ice cream growing up in Chicago. So that's really kind of wonderful. You hit a childhood memory with that.
Interestingly, that business was bought a couple of years ago by the Huffman family of Illinois and Naples and St. Louis. And I'm told they're going to open a bunch of Oberweis ice cream stores down here in the Naples to Fort Myers area. And they actually already have Oberweis ice cream at the Hertz Arena, which they own in this area as well. So I'm looking forward to having it.
It expands. That's what in California we're hoping is going to happen to In-N-Out Burger, which is a California tradition, which is in Nevada now. Maybe it will hit Illinois and maybe Florida someday, so we can have the worlds coming together.
Right.
Thanks so much, Jim. I'm going to put links in the description below for all that you mentioned, your action, your charity, your philanthropy, and your political activation too.
And I hope our viewers will take a moment and go to our website, votejimo.com, and on there you'll see a list of over 700 Republicans who've already endorsed our campaign for Congress. And if you look at my positions and you like what you had to see, I hope you'll click. There's a column for endorse or volunteer, and if you click on that column, and there's a tab that you can click on to endorse our campaign and add your name to the list. We're hoping to get to 1,000 by the time of the primary.
And it's awesome that you're still cranking it. You've been actively engaged most of your adult life in service, and you continue to do so in Florida too. So
Thanks again. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your viewers.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tim. Like, comment, share, folks, and hit the link below to learn more about Jim's campaign and help him along. It's a worthy cause, and it's wonderful talking to someone who's got common sense and just believes in the country and wants everyone to benefit. That's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.